Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are undertaking, well, a really difficult deep dive into one of the most frustrating and frankly tragic missing persons cases in recent Washington, D.C. history. We're talking about the disappearance of 8-year-old Relisha Rudd back in 2014. We've gathered the sources, articles, various investigative reports, critical analyses, and the goal here is to pull out the key facts, the timeline as we know it, and maybe more importantly, get some insights into the institutional failures that kind of allowed this to happen. Our mission is to understand why, even now, more than a decade later, Relisha is still missing.
And that institutional context you mentioned, that's really the crucial starting point here. Relisha Rudd, she was born October 2005. She officially vanished around March 1st, 2014. And if you start looking into how this case was initially covered, something really jumps out.
Yeah. What's that?
The silence, relatively speaking. The source material really points to a painful truth. Outside the D.C. area itself, this case just didn't get much national media attention at all.
And that lack of visibility, that's a major point of critique in the sources, isn't it? They suggest her identity, a Black child, from an impoverished family, living in a city shelter. It sort of immediately marginalized the urgency of the search.
Absolutely. It really forces that question. Who gets the spotlight? Who gets the immediate national resources when they go missing? The D.C. General Shelter, where Relisha lived with her mother, it was supposed to be a temporary safety net. Instead, it became this focal point of extreme vulnerability.
Okay, so let's really unpack that environment and the key people involved. Let's start right there. At the D.C. General Shelter, Relisha was living there with her mom, Shamika Young. And for you, the listener, to really grasp the severity of how things broke down, we need to introduce the main person who gained access to this family.
Right. That figure was Khalil Tatum. He was 51 years old at the time, working as a janitor. Now, it's important to note he wasn't directly a city employee. He worked for a contractor that managed the shelter, the community partnership for the prevention of homelessness.
Okay, a contractor. But the fact he was working directly with vulnerable families, children, in that specific environment, that becomes incredibly alarming when you look at his past. What do the sources tell us about Khalil Tatum's history?
They tell us his presence there was, well, frankly, a catastrophic failure and oversight.
No.
Tatum was a former felon. He had an extensive criminal record. We're talking multiple convictions, burglary, larceny, breaking and entering. He'd been in prison for a long stretch, 1993 to 2003, then again, 2004 until 2011.
Wow.
Yeah. So he'd only been out of prison for about 3 years when he got this job, working in a facility meant to house and protect kids.
That record it's astonishingly long and serious. How could any background check possibly clear someone with convictions spanning nearly 2 decades to work so closely with vulnerable families in a city shelter? That points right back to those systemic issues we mentioned earlier.
It really does. The source material doesn't give a clear answer on how it happened, just the stark reality that it did happen. And once he was employed there, the way he interacted with residents, that should have set off immediate red flags. He was reportedly known for inappropriately fraternizing with families, and specifically noted as paying, well, too much attention to young girls.
So he wasn't just an employee doing his job. He was actively, it sounds like, integrating himself with Relisha and her mother specifically. The sources mentioned things he did to build that relationship.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
He befriended the mother, Shamika Young. He did things like acts of generosity. He bought Relisha a tablet computer.
Which is a big deal for a child in a shelter setting.
A very big deal. And he took her to see Disney on Ice. These weren't just casual, friendly gestures. They seemed like calculated steps to build trust, gain access.
And this is where it gets really deeply disturbing. That access escalated from gifts and day trips to overnight stays. Shamika Young, her mother, eventually allowed Tatum to take Relisha away from the shelter. The reason given, apparently, was that Relisha would stay with Tatum and his granddaughter.
Yeah. And that unsupervised, prolonged custody, allowed by the family, seemingly unnoticed or unaddressed by the shelter management, that becomes the absolute pivot point for this entire tragedy. Tatum somehow managed to become the sort of unofficial caretaker for an 8-year-old girl living in a city-run facility.
Okay, so with that really disturbing background set, we need to shift to the timeline. Specifically, when the system, in this case, the school system, started to notice something was wrong. Relisha just stopped going to school at the beginning of February 2014.
Wow.
When did that absence actually trigger an alarm?
See, that's the problem, the delay. The absence started in February, but the school's first attempts to figure out why were met with, basically, deception. Relisha's grandmother, Melissa Young, she gave a note to the school. And this note claimed Relisha had health problems. and that she was supposedly being cared for by a Dr. Tatum.
Using his name. Dr. Tatum, the audacity there is.
Wow. Okay, so the school counselor, they accepted this note initially and tried to follow up.
They did. They contacted the phone number given, arranged a meeting with this supposed Dr. Tatum. But the real turning point, the moment the official alarm finally sounded, was only after Khalil Tatum didn't show up for that meeting he'd agreed to.
This is such a critical detail. It wasn't the mother reporting her missing. It wasn't the shelter staff. It was a school counselor acting on her concern, but only after this deceptive excuse fell apart.
Exactly. So the counselor contacted the police, reported Relisha missing. That initiated the official police probe on March 19th. Now, if you trace that back, she last attended school in early February. You're looking at almost a full month.
A whole month.
That critical 30-day window was just lost before the Metropolitan Police Department even knew she was officially missing. The sources really hammer this point, that delays severely hurt the chances of an immediate, effective investigation. 30 days. It's an eternity in a missing child case. It means investigators were immediately playing catch-up, relying on weeks-old surveillance footage to even establish a last point of contact. Instead of searching forward, they were scrambling backward. Let's trace those last confirmed sightings that police eventually put together.
Okay, so the sources detail two really critical sightings caught on camera. The first one was February 26th. That's just a few days before the date she's considered officially missing. Tatum and Relisha were seen walking together inside a Holiday Inn Express in Northeast D.C.
Okay, and the second sighting, the one that became the marker for her disappearance date.
Yes, that was March 1st. There's footage showing her walking with Tatum going into a room at a Days Inn on New York Avenue, also in D.C. That footage, March 1st, turned out to be the last definitive, verified proof that Relisha Rudd was still alive. After that, the trail just goes cold, and the timeline shifts very abruptly into something much darker.
Right. Now we move into this final, incredibly rapid phase of the tragedy. It starts almost immediately after the police officially open their investigation on March 19th. The suspect, Tatum, now knows people are looking for him.
And the escalation is immediate and violent.
Mm.
Khalil Tatum's wife, Andrea Tatum, she was found shot in the head in a motel room in Prince George's County, Maryland. That was March 20th.
The very next day after police started looking for Relisha.
The very next day. Surveillance video showed Andrea and Khalil Tatum entering that motel room together the night before. It confirmed he was the last person known to be with her.
So March 19th, police launched the probe for Relisha. By March 20th, Tatum is now a murder suspect in a totally separate crime. The whole situation just exploded in gravity.
It did. And it obviously changed the search for Tatum himself. While police are dealing with Andrea's homicide, they uncover another key piece of information. It relates to Khalil Tatum's actions right after Relisha was last seen alive. The sources say he was seen buying some very specific items on March 2nd. That's the day after Relisha's last sighting at the Days Inn.
What kind of items?
A shovel, lime, and 42-gallon trash bags.
Oh, wow. Shovel,
Yeah.
lime, trash bags.
Yeah. Those items, they strongly suggest an intent to dispose of evidence, almost certainly a body. This discovery immediately cemented him as the prime suspect, really, the only suspect in Relisha's presumed murder.
With that mounting evidence, D.C. police quickly got an arrest warrant for Khalil Tatum, specifically for his wife Andrea's murder. But the pursuit didn't last long.
No, it didn't. On March 31st, just over a week after that warrant was issued, Tatum's body was found. He was in a shed in Kenilworth Park, died of an apparent suicide, and the gun used was the same one that killed his wife, Andrea.
So the suspect's death, it essentially closed the main investigative path to finding Relisha, didn't it? But it answered absolutely nothing about where she actually was.
Exactly. The finality of his suicide just left this void.
Which means we're left with a dead suspect, his murdered wife, but no Relisha. Her body was never found. And that leaves the case perpetually open, unresolved. The lack of concrete answers forces everyone, investigators, the public, to rely on these limited but incredibly disturbing theories. What were the main theories authorities looked at?
Well, according to the source material, there were essentially two main working theories, at least initially. The most logical one, given the timeline, the items he bought, his wife's murder, his suicide, was that Relisha was murdered by Tatum, probably shortly after that March 1st sighting.
That seems like the most direct conclusion, yeah. And the second theory, it sounds like it was ultimately ruled out, but it speaks volumes about the instability around Relisha's life.
It does. It suggested that Relisha might have been sold by her mother, Shamika Young, and her stepfather, Antonio Wheeler, sold into like a sex trafficking organization. Now, the D.C. MPD detectives, they investigated this. They later ruled out the sex trafficking angle specifically.
Okay, that's important to clarify. Ruled out.
Right. But the fact that it was even considered a viable possibility highlights the kind of desperate, dangerous reality police were confronting. That this little girl was essentially passed around between unsafe adults.
Yeah. The trafficking theory was looked into, then discounted. But there's one source that gives a really unsettling insight into what officials thought might be Tatum's motive. Not just for Relisha's disappearance, but for killing his wife, too.
Yes, there's specific insight mentioned coming from a senior law enforcement official who spoke to the press. This official suspected Tatum had been sexually exploiting Relisha, possibly even pimping her to other people.
Oh, God.
And they suggested that maybe Andrea, his wife, found out about these activities. And that discovery, maybe she confronted him, maybe she threatened to expose him. That might have been the motive for why he killed her.
That paints an absolutely horrific picture. Extreme violence, potentially linked to predatory behavior, all happening around this supposed safety net of the shelter. But we do need to balance this with how Relisha's family sees it now.
Absolutely. It's crucial. The source material notes that her stepfather, Antonio Wheeler, and other relatives, they actively hold on to the theory that Relisha is still alive somewhere. For them, understandably, the fact that her body hasn't been found means the case isn't truly closed. It's a viewpoint that often provides some hope, however slim, in the face of just unbearable uncertainty.
And just to tie up loose ends regarding suspects, there was a brief look at Tatum's family members too, right?
That's correct. Early in the investigation, Tatum's brother-in-law, Ricky Sheridan Lyle Sr., was questioned by police. But after they reviewed evidence and his statements, authorities did rule him out as a person of interest.
So when we pull back and look at this whole deep dive, it's not just about one missing child, it's this terrible intersection of systemic failures. You've got the failure of the city contractor to vet an employee properly, the failure of the shelter itself to provide adequate oversight, and then that agonizing failure within the school system leading to that crucial 30-day delay before anyone even knew she was gone.
Yeah. And if you connect it to the bigger picture, the Relisha Rudd case really stands as this stark, painful lesson. A lesson in how the marginalization of vulnerable people, based on race, based on poverty, can directly impact how quickly alarms are raised, how urgently resources are deployed, how much public attention is generated. The tragedy is just compounded by the fact that the one person who likely held all the answers took them with him.
She's now been missing for over 11 years. The case is technically still open, just a source of this profound ongoing sorrow, especially in the D.C. community. The sources keep coming back to that unforgivable 30-day window between Relisha stopping school and the police finally being notified. So maybe the question for you, the listener, to really think about based on everything we've covered. When an organization gets a city contract to protect vulnerable people and they hire a repeat felon who then gets unsupervised access to a child for weeks, where was the single point of accountability? The mechanism that should have stopped this whole catastrophic sequence before it even began.
That lack of an immediate tripwire, an immediate alert in that environment, it's perhaps the most chilling detail of this whole thing.
A truly difficult deep dive, but a necessary one. Thank you for walking us through these devastating details.